Welcome to another episode of That's Some Crazy Shit with Kelly and James. I am Kelly, and the co-host with the most is James.
Hello, my friend. How are you today?
I am excited because last week I promised you some crazy shit off the crazy shit spectrum, and I think our guest today is there.
So we're bringing the crazier shit.
This is some crazy shit, James.
So we've upped our crazy shit.
Today we are going to be speaking with Sadhu Dah. And Sadhu Dah is a spiritual teacher who is from the Theravada lineage, which is one of the two major traditions of Buddhism. And that's not the crazy shit part.
No.
The crazy shit part is that this guy, this spiritual teacher, one of the things that he provides, one of the services that he does are exorcisms.
Okay, that's crazy shit right there.
And he's gonna talk to us about exorcism, talk to us about his first one. Like, I mean, who says, you know what? I think when I grow up, I do exorcisms for a living.
Didn't you say that when we were
That sounds great to me. It was some scary, spooky, off the wall shit. My mind is blown. I just think, as far as the level of crazy shit goes, exorcisms are up there.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, there's some crazy shit. I promised you some crazy shit. As a matter of fact, James, I gotta tell you, such crazy shit. Dude will be back. Sadhu Dah is coming back. You know,
yeah,
again,
we didn't even touch the.
My mind was just whoa.
Yeah.
So I think we should just. I'm not going to keep you in suspense anymore, listening people, listening audience, my fellow podcast peeps. You got to listen to this shit. Are you ready, James?
Well, let's do it.
Welcome to the podcast, spiritual teacher Sadhu Dah. Sadhu Dah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You know, we know that you're a spiritual teacher. You practice some other, what we would deem as crazy shit practices. And so I'm not going to get into what that is. I'm going to let you tell the listeners. I just want to thank you for being here. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So just get into it, and then we can get into the scary stuff.
Okay, sounds good to me. So what I tend to practice most predominantly would be varying forms of Thai Wicca. Wicca in the spiritual traditions of Thai culture is very interesting because it's a culmination of animistic traditions that predate Buddhism. And in the 14th century, when Theravada tradition of Buddhism was kind of taking over and becoming the main form of religion in Thailand, they were trying to the king was trying to tell the people, okay, we're going to stop practicing all these really old traditions. We're not doing that anymore. We're Buddhists now. And as you can imagine, that didn't go over well. So what ended up happening in the modern day was you got this blend of Buddhism that is so uniquely special to Thailand because it has a lot of the old cultural customs and traditions, such as like Native American shamans and those real old animistic traditions that they practice. There's a lot of that blended in with the Buddhist culture. So we have varying forms of doing this, such as like making takrut, which are like these yant sheets that have spell work inscribed on them, and it's usually like copper or gold pressed, and then it's rolled, and then these will be given to people and can also be implanted under the skin for protection. And a lot of Muay Thai boxers will have them wrapped with like a piece of cord around their arm when they fight for protection, and soldiers will wear them in the military and in the police force, and they're also added onto buka statues and a lot of other things to increase the power. So that's just an example of some of the Thai Wicca. So that's one specific style of making Thai amulets. And so that's kind of my main focus of what I really love doing, is studying and practicing different forms of Thai Wicca.
Very cool.
How did you get involved? Like, how did you stumble onto this? Or I'm going to go there. Is this something like your family practice, went to Thai, you know, or is it something as you were growing up, you kind of started learning about and brought you to where you are now?
Well, it was kind of a combination of just pure dumb luck and wanting to find something more in life. I came from a really trying background. My mother was a drug addicted prostitute, and my father went to prison for attempted murder when I was 4. So you can imagine that the background of what I grew up in with my childhood was very rocky. I didn't have role models. There was a lot of drugs around. There wasn't much supervision, and it was very easy for me to get in trouble and nobody cared. So when I got older in my late teens, I ended up, there was a local Wat, which is a name for a temple in Thai, in my city that I grew up in. And I didn't really have any intention of gaining anything by going there. I was more just curious. And I met a monk there named Thanaphol Pakdee, and he became one of my first masters. And when I met Master Thanaphol, he was kind of one of the first people that looked at me and saw past like my poverty background, the gang lifestyle that I was raised in, all my tattoos. He saw me as just a person. And so it was almost like being humanized for the very first time. And there was something about that that really spoke to me on a deep level. And so naturally I gravitated towards that person, and I wanted to learn more about the things he was into and how he was able to approach people without judgment, because I judged people even though I didn't want to be judged. And so that was kind of the beginning of the story of Sadhu Dah, and how I started to learn and practice and be taught, you know, these things that have now become a huge part of my life.
So, excuse me, when you started on this path, did you think you would be where you are now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It got weirder than I ever thought it would have. I just thought I was going to learn how to meditate in the very beginning. That was kind of my general thought when I started this.
So now today, you went through this journey. Now today, you offer services to people, and I want to talk about the exorcism because that scares me. I don't like dark energy, bad energy. Yeah, it does. It scares me. So to find somebody who actually says, yeah, I do exorcisms, my first question is why, right? Why? And like, how do you protect yourself? And what are these like really demons? Because sometimes I think, you know, we have issues like there are angels. If there are angels, that must mean there must be demons, right? I mean, you tell me, you're the exorcist, so you tell me like what you have experienced.
Well, the first thing would be to clarify some of the terminology. So when I do an exorcism, I'm looking at one or two things. Is it a human or an inhuman spirit? If it's a human spirit, in like Theravada culture, we would call these pray, P-R-A-I. So you have like prey spirits. These are ghost spirits of the underworld, right? And then you have what we would call demons in Western culture. And for me, I like to use that term because it's something people are familiar with and it gives a certain mental picture. But when I use the word demon, what I'm specifically saying is any non-human entity of a malevolent order. So any entity that is not human, quasi-physical in nature, and has malicious intent, that is what I call a demon. So there are many different classifications of entity that would compose the identity of a demon. Well, when I go into a situation that requires an exorcism, there's kind of two different types of exorcism that I would do. There's a exorcism where I am exorcising a spirit from an actual body. So this is an entity that has taken over or kind of merged with the consciousness of a person. So you'll see personality shifts, In some of the extreme cases, which are more rare, I have not come across many of these, but it does happen, and it has happened, and it scares the living crap out of me when I come across it. So don't think that I'm just like charging in there, you know, just completely like I'm invincible. I've been attacked, I've been hurt, I've faced a lot of really scary situations. But with the exorcisms, you'll get people sometimes that'll have facial morphing, like the structure of their face in live time. You can actually watch the bones reshape under the cheeks. Yeah.
Wow.
The eyes will get like wide like saucers, and it will be a glossy, sheeny kind of black. And they'll have a voice that doesn't match the voice of their body. Or, for example, like I had a female client who was in need of a legitimate exorcism, and her voice was able to develop a deep guttural growl that was physically impossible for her to actually emit that sound, but it was coming out of her. So you often have like these situations like that, which are on the more extreme end of exorcism. And then you have some where it's more of what I'd call overshadowing. So that's stage 2 versus stage 3. Stage 3 being actual possession. Stage 2 being overshadowing, where it's kind of like exactly how it sounds. The entity is kind of overshadowing the individual. So it might be able to influence them. It might be able to induce hallucinations. It's kind of hijacking the circuitry of their energy body, but it is not fully taken over them. And there may be brief periods where it can kind of take over, but it is not actually fully taken over that individual. I want to get there before it even gets to that point, ideally.
So are there certain criteria that you have to go through before you determine this person is in need? I mean, have you ever come across someone who says, I'm in need of this, but it's really what they didn't need? So, I mean, is there certain like things that you have to check off before you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
Yes. And one of those things is, first, I have to determine, is this a mental health situation? And I think that's one of the most important things, because I've come across individuals and the story they tell is just, you know, it's real to them. It's very real to them. But sometimes it ends up being a situation of, okay, this person needs a combination of Eastern and Western healing. They may need actual medication to help balance out some of their brain chemistry, and they may need some hypnotherapy session work with me, a little bit of soul retrieval, and we're more going into the territory of actually having to do some spiritual healing and spiritual counseling, as well as applying Western medicine, and that gets them into a better state of living and being. And an exorcism is absolutely not what they need in that situation. Then you also have situations that occur where this might be a generational curse, or there can be the effect of what I would call, so it's not necessarily an entity attachment, but you can have fractured states of the psyche, so disassociated parts or fragments of the personality. So there is a traumatic episode that occurred in their life at one point that they never resolved or healed, that became so disassociated and fragmented that it actually became sentient and adopted a persona of its own, and is now working against this person who it's actually a part of. If that person were to die, that host personality, this personality that has become dissociated and fragment, could no longer exist either. But it doesn't know that because it's become independent of that person's own reality. It's a very fascinating
that is.
And I've come across it quite a few times. And in these cases, sometimes because of the psychic emanations and energies of this person, it can actually induce psychic phenomena, kind of like a poltergeist. And in that case, an exorcism is not what they need, even though by a textbook appearance, it could look exactly like that. But this is why I have to be discerning, and I have to do my due diligence and research and working with the client and seeing what they really need. Because in a situation like that, I need to integrate that part of their personality, which involves a lot of internal healing, and which requires me to do a lot of fourth dimensional like integration work. And so like that's diving into their neurology using mirror neuron rapport, a lot of hypnotherapy work. So exorcism isn't going to do them any justice there. It's not what they need at all.
So once you determine that someone needs an exorcism, what would be the steps that you would take now?
So that's often a case-by-case situation, which if I'm dealing with something, just to give a couple examples, because this is so broad, if I'm dealing with a situation where somebody has like an incubus, succubus type spirit, this is a lower level classification of demonic entity that belongs to the bestial class. So these are not incredibly intelligent entities, but they're also very deceptive, very manipulative, and they're preying upon like sacral chakra energies, lower chakra energies. So it's feeding off of base desires and urges, and will accumulate those energies and feed off of them, versus trying to go for a full-blown possession. However, it can kind of invade their life in a very serious way, where you get like to be very blunt, I've had cases where people are being raped on a regular basis.
Wow.
Like ghostly body, tangible, you can feel it, them actually being held down in bed, and the full trauma of a human doing that to them. And this entity is feeding from that experience. The pain and the fear that's generated in the body of that person is actually sustenance and food for the entity. So in that kind of instance, to do an exorcism for that person, I need to first raise their vibrations energetically so that they're no longer in alignment with that entity, so then I can actually dislodge that entity. So what that would look like would be teaching these people mantra and teaching them how to do specific chants, which are going to raise their spiritual energies, giving them a sadhana, a daily spiritual practice. So I kind of have to teach them. I actually have to teach them how to do things, strengthen their energy body, so that we can actually begin dislodging the entity. And then once we get to the dislodging part, with that specific type of entity and situation, it's easier for me because I will just use my etheric energy, my chi hands, as they say, and I'll kind of grab the entity and I'll rip it away, I'll bind it, and I'll do my own ritual processes. What's different with a situation where you might have, let's say, an entity that somebody picked up in a graveyard, or if they played with a dark talisman and they get this entity that goes past the traditional stages, because you have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, infestation, manifestation, and that blends with overshadowing into possession. So sometimes things don't go by that order. So first something has to come into the home. It has to generate enough fear to produce the energy to manifest. Then it can form a direct attachment onto the person, whether they're at home or not. It can follow them, and then it can bridge into possession. Well, some situations, it'll just straight up go to manifestation and overshadowing, and then into possession. In very rare cases, it'll go straight to possession if you come in contact with it. Those are usually very dark talismans that somebody will come in contact with. They're intentionally made and designed for that kind of purpose. I've only come across 2 cases out of the hundreds of cases I've done where that has been the situation. In that case, I will use something that I call the Sudpanyak, Sudpanyak, and this is what the English rough translation from Thai would be ghost box ritual. And this is where I contact a deity known as Ta Wesawan, who is kind of, you would consider him to be in between the Asura realm and the Deva realm. So you have lower order, like basically land deities. These are earthbound, kind of like demigods. They're not quite angels. they're not quite deities of a heavenly order, but they are much, much more powerful than you know, even very high masters and gurus. Like, you know, they're gods in their own right. They're just not heavenly gods, and they're not evil, or they could be. It just kind of depends on their personality. But Taoism is kind of like right there. He's almost a heavenly deity, but he's also still an Asura, but not quite. So he's kind of in that cusp. So this ghost box ritual calls him, but you can't just do a chant and call him. There's a very specific process of inviting him into our dimension. And so you'll have these 4 boxes that are kind of in a square shape, each box individual in this corner. And then you have these white and these red flags on the corners of each box. And then you have white yarn that ties around each one of them. And this is to send the energies through all of it. And then you'll have the person who's possessed sit in the middle of that box, in the very center. So all 4 boxes are basically around them. And then you go through this very specific, very lengthy kata or chant, mantra, and then you call Taoism in. And in each box, you have these foods and these drinks and these candies, and this is like the offering to him. And then the chant, the mantra, the kata, brings Taoism down into the middle of the box. So what's actually really interesting here is you're doing a possession on top of a possession. So you're having this basically heavenly deity possess the body of the individual who's in the middle, who's in the ceremony now. And in this heavenly deity possessing the body of this person, it's actually kicking out the other entity.
Forcing the other one out, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
And then once that entity's forced out, then Taoism will come out of the body of the individual and then lay a blessing and protection around them, and then he leaves.
That is fascinating. So, you know, when you are doing this, are you, or have you ever been afraid? Like say your very first one, and I don't even know how you go down this road saying this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
There had to be a first
Experience.
one for you, right? There had to be a first one for you. Well, you had to decide that this is what you wanted to do to help people, right? So, are you ever afraid that something's going to try to attach it to you, or has that ever happened to you?
Or do you take steps to prevent it?
I now have reached a point where for that to happen to me, I would have to be going against something pretty big and bad. And I come up against things that would be considered big and bad on a somewhat regular basis. I'd say I get like a case like that at least once every couple months. And then I have a lot of lower level cases like crossing a ghost, or like, you know, I categorize things low, mid, high level. A high level demon would basically be, in my definition, what we would consider to be like Satan or the devil in Christian context. So that's like a race of entities called devils. So if I come across a true devil, I'm actually going to consult one of my colleagues or one of my masters to help me with that, because that's a very serious situation that I still run the risk of actually being killed coming up against. So even to this day. Now, in the past, I didn't really have a lot of means of protecting myself that I have now. So I have like sacred tattoos that are actually on my body. I have various different amulets and talismans, and a sacred space. Like my home is essentially a temple. I have so many things set up that when I do workings in my home, I pity the fool. You know, anything that tries to come into my space is going to be kicked out and punished thoroughly. And I have a bunch of spirit statues. I have like a literal army of spirits that work with me and for me, that are kind of like my employees, if you will. And like I give them regular offerings and stuff. And so they protect me and they work with me and they help me do these things. But in the beginning, the very first case I ever did was actually not intentional. I had joined a paranormal investigation group because I was curious. And at the time that I was training with Master Thanaphol, I was learning about meditation and spiritual wellness and some like amulet practices, but I wasn't learning about the paranormal per se. So I was curious about that. And I joined this paranormal group, and we ended up going on a case, and I met a teacher who on that case who ended up teaching me a lot of what I learned in the paranormal. Now, we went to these old barn grounds, and we found this talisman hanging from the rafters. It had like a chicken bone and jade stone, and was like woven with like knotted hemp, and like it was very beautifully made. Like somebody put a lot of time and energy into it. They didn't really know anything back then. Well, I took the talisman. You know, hey,
that sounds like a bad thing to do.
I would suggest not doing things like that. If you see a talisman in the middle of nowhere, you know, in a half burned down building that you have to climb into the rafters, and you find a talisman just hanging from the rafters, don't take it. Don't do what Sadhu Dah did, you know. So I took that, and there was a lady who was in the group that I'll say was kind of sweet on me, to put it lightly, and she came back to my place afterwards for things, and she'd seen the talisman, and we were talking about it, and she was like, can I try it on? And she put it on, and this is one of those rare cases I told you about. She put it on and immediately dropped to the ground and started having a seizure.
Oh my
and then
God.
So I'm like, I didn't know if she was epileptic or what. I kind of thought, okay, this is really weird. As soon as she put it on, she's like literally seizing and having, you know, convulsions on the ground. So I go and I pull it off of her, and then she just kind of like erectly stands up in just like very stiff posture, and she makes this sound like, and I'm like, no, this isn't happening. And she just looks at me with the most blank expression on her face, and her eyes immediately widened, like more than physically possible, and glossed over black. I watched from the corner of one of the eyes, just as it started to flash black and completely sheen over, and it was like reflective, just solid black. And then she started growling at me, like the most intense and scary, like it didn't even sound like an animal. Like this sounded dark. This was scary. Like saying the hairs on the back of my neck stood up doesn't even do it justice. Like I couldn't even imitate the growl. And so I'm kind of stumbling back. I'm all alone by myself in this room with this woman. No understanding or comprehension of what's happening, and she's straight up possessed. And so we're kind of like going back and forth. And you know, the most of what I knew with my upbringing, I was raised in a Christian household. You know, say what you will about my family and my upbringing, but you know, really all they ever introduced me to religious wise was just read the Bible, ask for forgiveness, that kind of thing. So that was really all I had to know. And from what I had been learning from Master Thanaphol, he hadn't really prepared me for anything like this. So I fell back on just like what I instinctively thought was going to save me, even though I didn't really believe, you know, in the power of Christ, essentially, to help me in this. It was really all I could draw back on. So I'm like reading different Psalms, and like this thing's just laughing at me, and tried to like bite my throat, and really
I'm sitting here with my mouth just hanging open. I cannot believe this.
To this day, that was honestly the scariest case I have ever taken out of all the cases I've taken. And I've had cases where I got levitated in the air and thrown against a wall by an invisible force that I could feel the hands grabbing me. This was scarier than that. This was the absolute worst case. And I would say probably not just because the level of phenomena that occurred and that this lasted for 7 days, but yes, lasted for 7 days. This was actually my trial and initiation into the spirit world under my first paranormal teacher, and also a Lama, who so Tibetan Bonpo. If you know the Dalai Lama, so the tradition that the Dalai Lama belongs to, that's like Bonpo, like Tibetan Buddhism. So this was a Lama who was teaching this young lady. His phone number was in her phone, and she was coming in and out of these bouts of possession, and she would talk about burning in flames, and then she would say, "Sensei, sensei," and then she would kind of like go back and be like, "Ah," and then one period she came through and she said, "Sensei, in my phone, call him." So I like go through her phone, wasn't password protected, and I go into contacts, and sure enough, there was a contact named Sensei. So it's like 3 a.m, you know, and I called this guy, and I'm like, "Hey, you don't know me, I don't know you, I don't even know how to explain what's happening. I don't even know if you're gonna believe me, but like, I think this woman's possessed." And I kind of explained a little what was going on. And when he first answered the phone, he sounded real irritated and annoyed. And then as soon as I started explaining the situation, you could tell I had his full attention. And the tone of his voice shifted from annoyed to serious. And he gave me this this proposal. He said, "All right, I'm going to give you 2 options." I've told this story to people many times, and so the 2 options he gave me were, I could come over there right now, I could make all of this go away, and for you it would be like a bad dream, and you would question the experience for the rest of your life, but it wouldn't seem real, and I'll handle it, and it'll be done and over with. Option 2, I give you a little bit of advice, and you deal with this on your own, and if you do well, I will answer every question you have ever had about the paranormal, and I will take you on as my disciple. I'm absolutely terrified, but that intrigued me. It spoke to me on a really deep level. So I said, "All right, I'll go with option 2. And he says, "Sigils, research them." And then he hung up the phone. And I'm just like floored. I'm like, dude, you're not telling me anything. You're not helping me at all. What I learned later, which made sense, because when things would get too overwhelming, she would go to sleep, and it was like I got time to rest, and it was really weird. What I didn't know then was that at that very moment we were on the phone, he had astrally projected, and he was watching the entire situation, and he was keeping the entity in check. So I didn't know that. And of course, him telling me that, obviously, 1, I probably wouldn't have believed it, 2, wouldn't have understood it, and 3, probably wouldn't have tried as hard and felt like it was as much of a life and death situation as I thought it was. It was still a very serious situation, but by the time he had astrally projected, before anything very serious could happen, he was kind of keeping it in check. And he was controlling the level of phenomena that this entity could create. She was still possessed, but he was controlling the possession. Kind of messed up when you think about it, because he could have ended it at any point, and this woman was suffering. But there was also a grander scheme at play here, and that was everything that would follow for years to come, and me becoming who I am today. I mean, this was literally like the Batman origin story, you know, like, you know, this was like Bruce Wayne losing parents. Yeah, like this was the moment. And so over the next 7 days, I had called the guy that was the leader of that paranormal group, which is funny because now he funnels me cases, and like he calls me when he has questions. And so he came over, and we tried all kinds of different things. We tried making holy water. We Google searched like sigils, didn't even really know what we were looking at. Found some weird like ceremonial magic and chaos magic stuff and tried that, and like nothing really worked. And there were interesting things that we tried too, like his grandmother had left him this silver cross, and I didn't know this then, and now it makes sense, but silver is actually like highly toxic to demonic entities. It's the vibrational content of it. And so we tried putting the silver cross on her. And it wasn't because it was a cross, it was because it was silver. And it actually burnt. She had burns on her skin, and you could see steam coming off of her skin, and she was writhing in pain. we actually had to take the cross off of her because she was in such intense pain, and it was giving her 2nd-degree burns when we put the cross on her. Wow. So like, that was intense. At one point she crawled up the wall, like exorcist style, like literally crab walked like up the wall, head spun around, like should have broken her neck. Like I shit you not. Like she had like spun her head around, like crab walked up the wall and was hanging upside down from the ceiling. And I'm just like, nope. I wanted everything in me wanted to run out of the room. And I would have, honestly, I would have ran and I would have abandoned this woman. I would have turned my back and I would never look back. But I was so paralyzed with fear, I couldn't. I was frozen. I couldn't leave if I wanted to. Like, and there was a couple moments that really stood out to me where it was like disassociation. And I remember saying this out loud too. I said, this is not real life. This is not real life. This isn't happening. Because it was like a horror movie. Like it was literally like Hollywood effects, like a real actual horror movie come to life. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't come to terms with it. Some of the things that were happening, I just could not believe that was actually real life. So, that was, I don't know, this is just kind of like a long-winded answer, or if that answered any of your questions, but like, yeah, I mean, that was kind of like my very first situation. And
that sounds horrifying. Let me just
say, and I like the way you say it. It's just all, yeah.
I'm surprised that you decided to continue down this path. But I will tell you, I would love for you to come back because we are running out of time. Because it sounds to me like we are just scratching the surface on what Sadhu Dah can do. And I'm all like, that's the first exorcism. That's enough to make anybody say, you know what? I'm done.
I know.
I'm
never dating again, man.
Right. You decided to continue on, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you did, and there's a lot of things that you touched upon that just made me come up with more and more and more questions for you. So I would love to have you come back.
Yes, please come back.
I would love to come back, and we'll schedule like another, interview. But I'd say in the meantime, write down some questions and topics, and I mean, we might even have to make this a multi-part.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to make it a multi-part.
Oh yeah,
we're not done asking questions, and I'm pretty sure we'll probably have listeners that have questions as well. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome.
Okay, I wish we would have had video because my jaw was hanging open the whole time. You said that we were going to have some crazier shit, Kel. Yes, that was crazier shit. And one other thing real quickly, I'm never going to date again.
I don't think it was a date, though.
Well, yeah. I'm not much of a picker-upper guy, but yeah, you go to a thing like that and you end up, I don't even know where to get started, Kel. My first thing is, okay, you go to an investigation. Okay, yeah. You see something hanging there.
A talisman.
So you go,
a talisman.
Yeah, a talisman. You go get it. Mistake number one. Okay. So then, you take it back to your apartment, whatever, with this chick, Hey, can I try that on? Mistake number two. It's like, I shouldn't say mistake, but it's like, these are the things they tell you not to do. But I also guess, these are the things that he had to do to start his path. So, but that was crazy.
It is the makings of every horror movie you have ever seen. You don't take shit from the paranormal site that you're at.
No.
You take nothing.
No.
Leave it there. Or you have an experience like Sadhu Dah.
Yep. And then if you do happen to take it home, don't try it on.
You know what the trippy
don't
shit
play
was?
With it.
This dude called somebody who could have remedied his problem. But instead he's like, I think I'm up to the challenge. Like
and
I
that
said,
takes some balls.
hey, it's crazy shit. Balls or not, you don't have to have balls to do that.
Well,
shit.
no, okay, that's true. That's
Just saying.
Terms I shouldn't put because it's sexist. But you got to have intestinal fortitude. Let's put it that way.
It's crazy shit.
I'm sorry. If I call someone and I'm like, I got this chick, her head spinning around. Can you help me out? Yeah, I can be over there and take care of it. Okay, thanks. See ya.
It wouldn't even been that for me because you know why? The minute they would have said, hey, you want to go on a paranormal investigation? Kelly would have been like, nah, I'll be back here.
That's true.
That's why I would never be in a horror movie because I'm not going there. I'm not the one.
You could be right at the beginning and then when say, hey Kelly, let's go check this haunted
stuff. They say that, Black people are the first ones to die in horror movies, and that's not true because honestly, our asses aren't there to begin with. Bullshit. I'm telling you, we ain't there. I ain't there. Me and Sadhu Dah would have never have met because I would have never been there.
Okay. I may have gotten as far as a paranormal investigation, but yeah, I don't know about that other.
That's some crazy shit.
That was crazy.
I told you that was crazy.
You did. We upped our crazy people. That was crazier shit.
And we still have questions for him. And that's just like the scratching of the surface of what this guy does. So he will definitely
his first one.
Yeah, and he'll definitely be back to share more of what he does and the type of things that he does, what he practices, more stories. He'll be back because he scared the shit out of me. I needed more. That's why I'm like, look, dude, nah, sorry.
That was cool, man.
I'm still like, ooh, that shit freaked me out. It did. Tripped out shit, man. That's some crazy shit.
That was, man.
All I can say. So,
and it's funny because people keep saying, where do you find these guests? It's like, these people find us.
Yeah, well, Sadhu Dah will be back to talk more about his experiences on another episode, James. As always, you can get us on our website, www.thatsomecrazyshitpodcast.com. Social media is there, our blog is there, and you can also listen to past episodes. So, James. Yep,
our history is there. Crazy or random bullshit?
I have nothing.
No random bullshit? Well, how about I throw this out then? You go on a social...
No. Oh, I thought you were going to say paranormal investigation.
And their head turns around.
No. No.
Is there a second date?
No. Absolutely
well, that was
not.
Quick.
Yeah,
that was a quick.
That's it. No. No. I can deal with somebody telling me that my plants are talking to me. I can even deal with somebody telling me that my mom is standing behind me, when my mom's been gone for years. But what I can't deal with is some dude talking about an exorcism and some chick running up his wall. I'm done.
Serious, that is. I think even we have a limit to the crazy shit that we'll get into. Yeah,
I'm done. But he'll be back because I did like him. I thought he was a cool dude. But as far as like the stuff he does, not even. Nah. I'm good. I don't even watch scary movies anymore, so I'm good.
Oh, you love movies. You'll watch scary movies.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you're more mob movies.
I don't do like The Conjuring and like devil movies, shit like that. No, I do not.
I like The Conjuring. That was good.
No, that's a whole nother deal. But no, I do not do those types of movies, especially after we started doing this podcast. Hell, nah, I'm good.
Well, then that's another episode. We're going to talk about movies we will not watch.
I have a list of them. It's ongoing. Until next time, James.
Keep your minds open, people.